Welcome to Cambridge House Live. I'm Bridget Anderson at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference, and I'm joined today by Rex Weyler, who's the co-founder of Greenpeace and also a journalist and author, and also Marin Katusa, who's the Chief Energy Investment Strategist at KC Research. We are going to discuss and debate a very important topic to a lot of people in Canada and North America. Enbridge's $6 billion proposed Northern Gateway pipeline. It has put energy development and production on the front burner for a lot of Canadians. Marin, I want to start with you. You are in favor of the pipeline, so tell us why.
Well, first off, I want to congratulate Rex and his team on what they're doing, because part of being Canadian is having the right to voice your opinion. And I think they've done a great job to that. What I'm in favor is sensible solutions to development. And I think what we need to do is slow down this access to the development and really look at the sensible solutions to this. For example, we know about the economic benefits. Right now, because of the oil differentials between what the US are paying for our Canadian oil versus what for the same type of oil that US are paying the Venezuelans, is about $30 billion to the industry annually today, and that makes a difference about $5 billion to the government, which can be spread in different organizations. But more importantly, what I want the sector, and I'm just talking about the industry in itself, the government, and the communities to understand is we need to sit down and really think this through and go, how can we better plan this? One thing that we have to understand is we got to develop this in such a way where we bring in environmental bonds so that across these regions, everyone is accountable for this. Number two, maple leaf oil is much more ethical than a lot of the oil in the world, which I call bloody oil, which is going on right now. So we need to develop these ways with more engineering reports, more time to assess the risks. We need environmental bonds, but most importantly, we need to upgrade the existing infrastructure. So for these pipelines to go in, for every new meter of new pipeline, we need to upgrade an equivalent amount of existing aging infrastructure. And that's the real risk right now in Canada.
Okay, Rex, I'm going to bring you in here. I want to get your opinion about some of your concerns. Voice some of those for us about the pipeline.
Well, perhaps the biggest problem for the pipeline for people in British Columbia is we don't want to be the tar sands oil port because we don't want the risk of an oil spill on our coast. That's number one. Because of our fishing, because of our tourism, because of our coastal economies, it's just too big a risk, and the risk-reward factor is just not good enough. And even so, our economy is based on the health of our coast. We don't want to risk an oil spill, and especially a bitumen spill. One of the problems with the tar sands bitumen is it's more destructive, more ecologically destructive, more carbon in the atmosphere. It's harder to clean up. It's more expensive to clean up. This same company, Enbridge, had a 20,000 barrel spill in the Kalamazoo River, and the EPA, the US EPA, found out it cost them 10 times the cost per barrel to clean that up from conventional oil. So, and you also have a byproduct of the tar sands bitumen, which is petroleum coke, which is used as a substitute for coal, releases 4 times the carbon effluents. So global warming, oil spill on the coast, the cost of cleaning it up, and when they have what they call a cleanup of an oil spill, they get 10 or 15% of the oil that's spilled. So the threat to our marine environment is just too much. The other thing we need to know is that if you're an oil port, if we make the west coast of BC an oil port, more oil is spilled in normal spillage than in the large oil spills.
And Marin, that's where a lot of the opposition seems to focus around safety and around the threat of spills. And you're talking about the economic benefits. What I think a lot of people would say, yeah, I do see some economic benefits there, but that doesn't outweigh what they say are the concerns about our environment. So,
well, first, right off the bat, the number one thing is human error is going to happen. And I agree with Rex. We really need to think about what we're doing here, but let's put the numbers in perspective, Rex. If you take the amount of gasoline spillage from lawnmowers, the gasoline spillage from filling up your gas tank, filling up your chainsaws, makes up 45 times more oil spillage in the US and North America from citizens cutting their grass and driving to work and filling up their gas tanks and chopping down their trees than all of the oil spills globally. That's a government statistic. Okay, so when we look at all of these facts, when you put it in perspective, okay, and again, I completely agree, we need to really engineer and design these facilities because we can't afford environmentally any issues.
Rex,
Unfortunately,
do you think that Enbridge can guarantee safety?
No, of course not. And if they could, then they would buy insurance and indemnify us for $100 billion or whatever an oil spill would cost this region. So no, they can, and they know they can. They've said they can. They cannot guarantee that there won't be an oil spill. And besides that, as I said before, if you're an oil port, you have oil spills. Partially in line with what you just said is that normal spillage is the greatest amount of oil in the oceans.
So Enbridge is saying at the hearings that it is taking steps. There is always going to be human error, but it's taking steps to ensure that in the event of a spill, that there is going to be stringent procedures in place to deal with that. Is that enough of a? Do you think that they could ever go far enough to assuage your fears?
Well, no, but the best oil. It's always great to improve your technology, but the best oil cleaning technology that we have on the planet today was used in the Gulf of Mexico, where they got about 15% of the oil that was spilled. They recovered. The rest is still there. It's destroying the marine life, destroyed tourism in that region, it destroyed fishing in that region, and so forth. It cost them billions and billions of dollars. We don't want the risk.
Marin, I want to talk about the economic benefits, because on the other side of the equation, for a lot of people, they're saying, you know what, we need to start thinking about being an energy producing nation and to look after our own needs. So what are the economic benefits of having the Northern Gateway Pipeline?
Sure, let me just bring back some science. My background from the university days is half of the oil spills actually naturally evaporate. So depending on the density, the bitumen is a much higher density, so it's not as evaporated as a light oil. So Rex is correct there. But when we look at the issues, first off, no one's talking about it, and I'm here to not just educate the industry and the government, but also the communities, because why are people not asking for these environmental bonds? When you build a copper mine in BC, we have to put up environmental bonds such that it's an economic benefit to not just the community in that specific region, but you put up environmental bonds across the different geographical, so you protect yourself from the waterways, from the landslides, from all the different restrictions. Now, if you talk about the economics, what does this really mean today? The Americans are getting a discount to Canadian oil.
Marin, I'm just going to stop you for a second and excuse my ignorance on this, but I don't really understand what an environmental bond is.
Sure.
And so why hasn't Enbridge then taken that step?
Because nobody is talking about it, and this is why I'm saying, why do we not bring up?
So explain what it is then.
Sure, so what it is the company, in this example would be Enbridge, puts up X amount of dollars after the engineers and everyone involved thinks that this is amount available that for this specific region. So let's say we're going over a specific amount of a terrain in BC. Then that's held in trust with the government. And then the lifetime of that pipeline, and then basically you also have to bring in upgrading of the existing infrastructure. That's key, and nobody is talking about these things. I'm sitting here going, why not?
So Rex, would there be an amount that would be high enough in an environmental bond that you would say, maybe I could take another look at this?
I don't think so. The city of Vancouver asked Kinder Morgan, who wants to increase their pipeline, for the same thing, for a bond. Well, the oil spill in Georgia Strait, what would that cost in Burrard Inlet? 40 billion, 50 billion? That's what it costs in the Gulf of Mexico. So if they put up $50 billion, but what's the price of our reputation? BC is...
The difference between the Macondo well, that was a well producing 20,000 barrels a day versus one of these tankers. So you can't compare a well disasters to a tanker. Now I agree with you, but what we really need to look at is the average pipeline. This spill is about 200 barrels of oil from an average pipeline spill. A tanker holds 700 barrels. We're relying on tankers.
700,000 barrels.
700 barrels per tanker well, and it has about 300,000.
What kind of tankers are you talking about? Not ocean-going tankers.
No. I'm talking railway tankers. So the railway tankers now, the big ones are going to be about 1 million barrels, the new ones that they're going to bring in. But what I'm talking about is instead of developing and upgrading our existing infrastructure, we're depending on this rail. They come in about 100 rail cars, they link them up. You're 34 times more likely, according to the government statistics, to have an oil spill from rail than you are aging infrastructure. The average age of a pipeline, there's 76 million meters of pipeline in Canada. Average age over 26 years. Half of that needs to be replaced.
But Enbridge itself has dozens of spills over the last few years. It seems like every time we turn around, we have another Enbridge spill, another pipeline spill. 20,000 barrels into Kalamazoo, 10,000 barrels here. But now we're talking about putting this bitumen, which really is the dirtiest oil in the world. It really is, because it produces more carbon, it produces these it produces carcinogenic toxins in the environment. They found 20 times the polycyclic hydrocarbons, one of the most toxic elements that we know of, 20 times increase in the lakes in Alberta because of the tar sands. So you have a cancer increase in Alberta, which has now been confirmed. The people have been telling us this for a decade. So you have all of these problems with it. So we're saying, no, there's no net benefit to Canadians to bring this oil across British Columbia, put it in tankers, and use British Columbia as a oil port.
Okay, so I think we're going to probably remain divided on that, because that is the one thing I think that really has galvanized is around environmental safety, and that issue I think people will remain divided on. But I want to move away from that and talk about the economic benefits and about energy self-sufficiency. So how important is it for a pipeline like this to go through, and what would be the economic benefits for British Columbia or Canada?
For Canadians, it is actually very significant. If done properly, through a sensible solution, with environmental bonds put in place, with the upgrading of existing infrastructure. The key here, the real risk, is opposing everything and not getting the existing infrastructure upgraded. That's the real risk to the Canadians. That's what needs to be talked about. Do you know, we've got 13% of our pipelines were built before 1960.
But going back to the economic benefits, because
It's billions
for Canada,
for
but what about
Canadians.
for British Columbia, where the pipeline would go through? That's been a sticking point for British Columbians.
You look at the ports that need to be built up, you look at the hull tankers, you look at maintaining and regulating the pipelines. Right now, to build this, it's with the exact kilometers, just around 1,700 kilometers. We're going to have the most modern existing infrastructure, and I'm not just saying stop it and then go away. We need to hold these companies accountable, and that with that comes jobs to maintain it, regulate it, inspect it, and that's not just in Alberta. We're talking across the sectors. So it is in the billions net positive for British Columbians.
But one oil spill wipes all that gain out.
Okay, so Rex, let me stop you there for a second, because when it comes to the economic benefits then, and there are people who are saying, yeah, okay, so we can see that BC and Canada would benefit greatly from this. So when it comes to energy development for you, do you see it as no, you're opposed to all energy kind of development?
Of course
because
not, no.
I mean, people use oil, they use gas, and
Well,
we're not moving
but this
away
oil
from that
that's
as
going,
a society.
this oil that's going to go through these pipelines and get on tankers, that's not for Canada, that's going to the U.S. and China to build China's economy. If we wanted to build the
Which we do benefit from.
Well, if we wanted to build the Canadian economy, we would cap the tar sands right now at current production. We would clean it up so we're not putting carcinogens into the water tables of Alberta and carbon into the air. We would clean it up, cap it now. We would localize, we would refine those products in Canada. Why are we shipping it to China? So just let me finish.
Are you in
Why let
favor of a
China
refinery?
benefit? I mean, I'm not against China, but why shouldn't Canadian companies be refining this? And finally, and this is important, is the transition from hydrocarbons to renewable energy. And we should be using the revenues from the tar sands, if there are any. I'm not in favor of the tar sands, but if we're going to do it, we need to cap it, we need to clean it up, we need to localize it, and then we need to transition to renewable energy.
And what about refineries? So I just want to clarify this. You're saying that you are in favor of refineries.
No, I'm saying if we develop a resource in Canada, we should have the secondary industry, the secondary income, the secondary benefits here in Canada. We're doing the same thing with this bitumen that we did with our forests. Chop down the trees, put them on boats, ship them to Japan, to China, to Europe. We're a resource colony, and Canada is better than that. Canada should have these secondary industries. We should be using our forests and all of our resources that we take out of our ground. We should be using it to develop secondary industries here in Canada. Why do we ship all our logs out of BC and then we buy IKEA furniture? We should have a furniture industry in Canada.
The issue when you talk about the refineries, when you have a refining complex, it's not just gasoline that they make. Remember, the iPhone, all these Sony products, the plastics that are used from this are all from the oil, and it comes down to the industry. It's not just building a refinery, because what are you going to do with these products? We don't have the infrastructure for that, and really, we don't have the demand within Canada. So the reality of it is these refineries don't just refine oil, they separate to the different types of products that go into this thing. Second part is the green energy. I completely agree. I was the largest investor in green energy, the largest geothermal plant built in Nevada in the last 25 years. I was part of the team that built it, and I was the largest investor in that. Unfortunately, my partner also, I lost $10 million on that plant. It's called Nevada Geothermal. My partner, Rick Rule, is the largest investor in geothermal energy in the US. And again, unfortunately, the geothermal isn't everywhere. The problem with solar is nighttime. Wind isn't reliable. Those are not baseload powers. Baseload power, it means it works 24/7. The reality is the oil industry are the largest investors in green energy. The government has done, within all its subsidies and grants and everything, about $45 billion in North America for green energy. The oil industry has invested over $90 billion. And these are things that they've done well, but we need to push that forward. We need modern development, a sensible solution to this.
Go ahead.
Well, yes, but it's all way, way too slow. And these renewable energy sources, first of all, that's right, there are interruptions with wind, there's interruptions with solar, there's limits with geothermal, but if you have a diversity of energy sources, and if the government is promoting a diversity of energy sources, look, our current Canadian government is promoting tar sands production. They want to increase the tar sands production from 1.8 million barrels a day up to close to 10 million barrels a day. They want to increase it by 5 times. We have a serious global climate problem by putting carbon in the atmosphere. We're heating up the planet. We're facing runaway global warming for our progeny, for our future. We've got to stop with the hydrocarbons, which means we have to take whatever hit we have to take to transition to geothermal, to wind, to solar, and it may mean that we have to, give up something like some quick money from the tar sands, but we have to do it.
Marin, do you think that's reasonable?
Oh, I think if you look at my publications, I'm going to be...
take a hit to try and get society and to get industry to move towards more green options.
And it is, but not just for green diversified. We need a diversified energy matrix. That's a successful model to go. So I agree with that. And I think that nuclear is part of that mix. Clean coal, clean natural gas, and green energy. But moving forward I think, Rex, you'll agree with me on this. Even with all the flaws with our industry, and we need to improve it, but maple leaf oil is much more ethical than the oil produced in Nigeria, in the Russians. If you take the Exxon Valdez disaster, which is the largest well-known North American tanker disaster, it's still half, okay? Just the Exxon Valdez is half of the oil spilt there than people filling and cutting their grass annually in North America.
Well, there's a big difference between spilling crude oil in a marine environment and spilling a refined environment in your yard.
It all goes into the water table. It's all water table.
Well,
but if you compare
it doesn't
the North American disaster to the Russians, our disasters with our industry is nowhere near the disasters going on in Russia and in Africa and the Middle East.
Disasters. But it's partially true, but you cannot say this oil is ethical if we're increasing the cancer rates among the people in Fort Chippewa. If we're putting toxic chemicals in there,
statistically analyzed. There's arguments to that too. Now they didn't research it as well.
Well, there's arguments, but people are dying in the meantime. People are
agree.
dying. And they've been complaining of ill health and coughs and so forth and cancers and mysterious deaths. And now we have absolute academic evidence that we are increasing the cancer rates in Alberta, so we can't call it ethical. In the meantime, we're heating up the planet with the effluents, with the carbon effluent.
Well, it's much more moral than the global oil being produced. And look at the human rights. We need to bring our industry to match the parallel of what the Canadian mining industry has done.
Why do you think the Indigenous people are so against it in BC and Alberta? If you want to talk about human rights, you have to listen to the Indigenous people of British Columbia and of Canada who are saying, we do not want these pipelines, this bitumen pipeline coming across our land.
And Rex, you've been very vocal in your opposition in media, and I think people are quite aware of why it is that you're opposed to this. We only have about a minute or so left, so I'd like to get your thoughts wrapping up. If the pipeline is approved, what do you think this means for Canada, and how would you deal with that personally, as being so active as you have been and so vocally opposed?
Well, look, I've been fighting for what I think of as sort of ecological common sense most of my adult life. I don't win every battle. Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win, but we never give up. I do not believe this pipeline will be built. I do not believe that the Indigenous people in British Columbia will allow it to be built. I don't think the people of British Columbia will allow it to be built. If it is very hypothetical. I think there's a very, very small chance. I mean, people want investment advice. My investment advice regarding these pipelines is to short Kinder Morgan and short Enbridge, because they will not be built.
Marin, your final comments?
I think it's we as all Canadian citizens are at large risk by just saying, no, we don't want this being built. What we need to say is, what's the sensible solution to this? And encourage and work solutions, not just with the community, the government, and the industry, to upgrade the existing infrastructure, get away from the reliance on the rail cars. That is the real risks here, and we need to find a sensible solution to this. It's going to happen, we need to work with it, and let's get everyone on the table, let's slow it down. What the rush is here, we need to get better engineering studies and get this done, because it is a net positive. If it's done properly through a sensible solution, this will be a net positive for all in Canada.
Marin and Rex, thank you very much for your thoughts. I appreciate it.